As someone who suffered with OCD for most of my life, it frustrates me to no end when you hear somebody go down the street and they say, "Oh, it's my OCD. Oh, my OCD is making me do this. Oh, I must have OCD because I like to keep my things clean. Oh, it's my OCD because I like to count to 4 instead of 3. Oh, it's my OCD because I like to keep my car clean." If you actually have OCD, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You do not have OCD if that's the way that you think, okay? I'm sorry, but that is not OCD. OCD is not just because you want to keep things clean. OCD is not just because you have an obsessive thought. That is not what obsessive compulsive disorder is. And so many people in the world today would like to tell you that that is what it is. And they'll say like, "Oh, well, you just have, you just have OCD. You just have OCD. I have OCD. We all have OCD," but that's not the case. OCD is very different than what people tend to think it is. A lot of people have two misconceptions. People tend to think that OCD is just cleanliness OCD. It's just orderly OCD. You just can't touch germs. You just can't touch things. You have to keep things in a specific order, and that's it. But as someone who suffered with OCD and different types of OCDs, we do know that there's a lot of different types of OCDs that go way beyond cleanliness OCD and order OCD, okay? There's OCDs like scrupulosity, real life OCD, pure O. There's different OCDs like, I've heard of people like, this sounds insane, but it's true, and it's so sad, but people not thinking that their head is on top of their body, constantly having to check that their head is on their body, checking OCD, going and making sure that the stove is turned off before they leave. There's things like contamination OCD, and not necessarily from the standpoint of, oh no, it's dirty, but because it almost becomes a moral aspect because they don't want to infect or hurt other people. So what they'll do is they won't touch their shoes, for example. They'll never touch their shoes, so they won't ever put them on all the way. They won't want to get the germs that are on the floor, on the, on the car mats, out on the street, on their hands, because if they get it on their hands, they then might get that on someone else's hand that they touch, and then maybe there's a virus on their hand that gets onto the other person's hand, and then they get sick, and then it becomes this moral issue where they're then at fault for getting the other person sick. And if they get them sick, they might get, terribly sick, maybe even deathly ill, maybe they die. How terrible of a situation would that be, right? And then it's their fault. And how would they know if it's their fault? It's impossible to know. And so to be 100% sure that it's not their fault, they constantly will be checking or making sure that they're constantly not at fault for doing something like that. Okay, so there's a lot of different types of OCD. There's tons of different OCD. There's harm OCD, for example, where you're afraid that you're going to hurt someone or something. It could be an animal, for example. So you are always like never touching anything or anybody. There's different types of OCD, and a lot of people just think that there's one type of OCD. So when you tell people, I know a lot of people, okay, so for example, I had a buddy. We went to the gym, and I love him. He's cool, but, and it's no disrespect to him. He just didn't know. I didn't know either. I remember a long time ago, before I was really diagnosed with OCD, we'll get to the buddy story in a minute, but I was watching the TV show Monk. Now, if you haven't seen Monk, it's a great depiction of OCD, and it's a super funny show. For those who don't know, it's basically, it's this detective, and he is plagued with OCD. Now, he is super, super smart, and a large part of the reason he's so successful as a detective is because he notices details that nobody else would notice because he has his OCD. His abilities to notice detail are just at an insane level, right? But he has order OCD, and he has cleanliness OCD. And his OCD was spurred on by the trauma of losing his wife. And his wife was killed. She was murdered in an accident. And the thing is he was never able to solve his wife's murder, but he could solve everyone else's murder. And I remember watching this show growing up and always thinking like, well, that's OCD. Always just being super clean, always being afraid of germs, and that was it. And I had that misconception for a lot of years until, frankly, I got it, until I was diagnosed with it. I didn't even really know that there was other types of OCD until I got diagnosed with the OCD myself, right? So it's kind of a bit of an ironic thing. So fast forward, I was at the gym with my buddy, and I I was sweating, and he was sweating, and he handed me like a towel that he was using, and he's like, "Oh well, you probably don't want to use this, do you?" Because he knew about my OCD. And I looked at him like, "Why not?" And he's like, "Cause like OCD, right?" And I'm like, "No, like that's fine. Like I'm sweating. Like let me just grab the towel. Like he had used it once or whatever, like to wipe off one of the bars, and I needed to use it to wipe off something else. But I didn't. He thought I wouldn't want to touch it in the interim of me wiping off the the bench or whatever it was that we were using. And I told him, I was like, no, there's no problem. Like my OCD, at this time, I've had it before where it was cleanliness OCD, but at this time it wasn't really affecting me in this time. So I told him, I was like, no problem. Like hand me the towel, it's all good. So I wiped down the bench and we were fine. But the thing was, is I told him in that moment, I'm like, there's a lot of other types of plagues when it comes to the way the OCD attacks. And he didn't understand it at the time, and I had to explain to him. And I think there's a common misconception that a lot of people have that there are different types of OCD, and that's okay. I just think that the world is they don't really know. A lot of the people don't know unless you have been diagnosed with it, unless you live with somebody that has the OCD themselves. And I think you have to be understanding of this. A lot of people, they get freaked out. I know for a fact, like I've struggled personally with harm OCD, where I was afraid, for example, to touch my dog because I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'3", 6'4", 220 pounds. I've played sports all my life. I played football. I played basketball growing up. I'm a very loving guy, but I'm a big guy, right? So I've always, you know, I always had the capacity, like, to hurt my dog. Like, and I would never do that, of course, because I love my dog. But I always knew that, like, I had the capacity, and because I had OCD, that fear kicks in where I was afraid that if I pet the dog too hard, I might hurt her, right? And I didn't want to ever do that. But that's the OCD, is like that fear of, oh no, well if I touch her too hard, maybe I'll hurt her. Okay, well, to be 100% sure that I won't hurt her, what I'll do is I'll not touch her, so I wouldn't touch the dog. And so then I would just never pet the dog, which is kind of sad, right? Well, what's the point of having the dog if you never pet the dog? You never play with the dog like that because you're afraid of hurting her. And so the relationship kind of suffers because the dog is not getting the affection that she needs. You're not really enjoying the dog like you should because you're not petting the dog. You're not really playing with the dog like you should. And it's this kind of, underwhelming relationship that you should have with your pet, right? So it's a sad situation altogether. And that was kind of the situation, and it transpired over to people. Like I wouldn't want to hug my mom, for example, because I was afraid, like, well, what if I hurt her when I hug her? Or what if I like turn one day and like I decide to hurt her, which I would never do, right? That obviously has to be said. Like I would never hurt anybody. And I would argue, anybody that is struggling with harm OCD, I would love to argue that we are more careful, I would say, than the general public of not hurting people, because we care so much so that it's consuming us, worrying about us, making sure for 100% sure that we're not going to hurt anybody, right? So we got to understand too that it's a disease. It's not something that's like, we're not someone that's like sitting there thinking like we're going to go hurt people and da 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 da, we're planning this. That's not what it is. It's a fear of the potential of doing it. Not a fear because we want to do it. Do you understand the difference? There's a big difference there. And a lot of people will get that confused, especially when you go to somebody and tell them, hey, I have a fear of hurting you. Like they'll be like, what? You know what I mean? So, but if you go to a therapist, I remember when I went to my OCD therapist, which specialized in OCD treatment, there's a big difference. If you go to a talk therapist, they're probably not going to understand this, but I went to an OCD therapist and I told her this specific situation that I was experiencing, and she totally understood. She's like, okay, yeah, this is totally normal. I have a lot of patients that experience this, and we'll go through the steps on how to treat this, and it's not a big deal. But when I told my mom at first, like she was like, hi, I'm kind of scared. I don't really understand this. Like I think you need to talk to your therapist. And I talked to my therapist, and my therapist talked to my mom, and it was like this total normal situation, right? So just understand that like people might not understand at first like how to deal with this kind of OCD. And there's different types of OCDs like this. There's even like, there's other types of OCD we can't even really talk about on YouTube. But, there's different types of OCD that the general public might not understand and might not really know how to treat. And that's okay. Just know that there is help out there professionally, and you just have to seek out the therapist. So what I would do, if you are struggling with one of these types of OCDs, honestly, any of them, I would seek out professional help from somebody that is an actual OCD therapist, not somebody that's a talk therapist. That really doesn't help that much. In fact, I would argue that it does the opposite, because you need specific OCD therapy. So I would, for example, I've gone through quite a few therapists in my time. And here's the problem. Here's the problem with what I did. I did not know I had OCD for many years. I had the symptoms and I had the problems, but nobody knew that it was OCD because I didn't have enough people around me that were experiencing it. So we had to figure it out the hard way. And eventually, we figured it out. Thank goodness, right? But it was super difficult for many years. Many years. And, I wish I would have had that help, which is why I'm super, passionate about this project on this YouTube channel. Like, this channel here, I hope can help somebody out there that is experiencing OCD and doesn't know where to go. I've had nobody to help me for 15 years. There's been people, and you know who you are, who've helped me, but I've had to find you, and I've had to find the help. I've had to search for it, and I've had to seek it, because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to navigate this. I didn't have anybody just pushing themselves in my ear saying, you need to do this, do this, do this, do this to find the success. I had to figure it out. I had to find what worked in my brain. I had to figure out the methods in, with the madness that was going on with this OCD. People look at me, that's the thing too, people look at me in my normal life and they think that I'm normal because I appear normal. And that's the thing too with OCD. A lot of the times you can live a very normal life, and I would even argue that a lot of the time people think you're even on top of things a lot because you have a lot of order in your life, because you can be very orderly in your life with a lot of things, because you use that very specific mindset that you have that you can apply with OCD, and you apply it in a lot of things in your life. But the problem is that OCD can flip on you in certain areas, and then you can become very disorderly, and it attacks, and then it'll take you down in ways that people can't see. And so they'll expect certain things of you, and then it'll debilitate your life entirely. And that's a super difficult thing to deal with. And so, people looking in on my life thought that I was totally fine, but I wasn't. And there was this time where, I'll get into it in another video. In fact, my first video that I put out, you can go back and see that I talk about kind of my general experience of how I came to realize I had OCD and my experiences with it. But just know, you're not broken as a person. It's something that we have to deal with. And I would argue, I wish it upon nobody, but I would argue that you're going to become a stronger person because of it. And I would even argue that it will make everything else in life easier, because it's so hard to figure out how to deal with. Everything else will become easier. All the trials and tribulations that you will have to pass through in life will generally become so much easier. So, it's okay. People, they don't understand that there's a lot of different types of OCD. That's totally fine. But just know that the most important thing is that you understand that there's different types. There's a lot of different types. And I would urge you to study the different types. There's a lot of different OCD book resources that you can look up, that you can find. You can even go to ChatGPT or Claude or different Grok or whatever, or YouTube, or my channel, and you can find different resources on the different types of OCD. Study them. Try to find the one that you resonate with, the one that you suffer with. But the thing is, it's probably the most important is not necessarily the type of OCD that you have, and here's why it's not necessarily important. The reason it's not important is because the way you treat it is not, the way you treat it is the same. It doesn't matter what OCD you have, the way you treat it is exactly the same. Okay, so OCD is the obsession. So the obsession is the fear of something happening. So you have an obsession about something because you don't want something to happen. So for example, with that harm OCD, my obsession was, I do not want to hurt my dog. So what am I going to do? The compulsion is to be 100% sure that I would not hurt my dog. I would not touch my dog. I would not pet my dog. So I wouldn't pet my dog. The compulsion would be, I'm going to keep my hands off the dog and I'm not going to pet her no matter what. Even if it's just a little nice cute pet, not doing it. To be 100% sure, and then I would know for a fact that I would never hurt her and that we would be good. And so, I mean, that's sad, right? Obviously, because then the dog, poor little guy or poor little girl, she's never getting pet, right? But I knew for a fact that I wouldn't hurt her physically. Probably emotionally, she was sad, because I wasn't petting her. But yeah, so that was the way that that's the way that OCD works. The obsession compulsive disorder. It's a disorder, right? But the way that you treat this whole thing is with the concept that that anybody or everybody, the clinicians call ERP, exposure response prevention. So the way that you basically want to do this is pet the dog a lot and basically do the opposite, which we'll get into in another video. But the way that you treat it doesn't matter what it is. If it's cleanliness OCD, is, let's say you have a fear of dirt. I'm out here kind of in this jungle, basically, there's a lot of dirt around me. Someone that would suffer with cleanliness OCD would have a fear of the dirt, right? So what they would want to do is stick their hands like in this dirt. And usually what they would do is they would probably wash their hands a bunch. Well, you'd probably want to like practice holding your hand up for like 45 seconds to a minute, 2 minutes, and then wash your hands. And then do it again. And this time, instead of a minute, let's go for 3 minutes. Wash your hands. Now this time, let's do for 5 minutes. Wash your hands. Now this time, let's do for 10 minutes. You get the point. So you're practicing experiencing the anxiety that comes from the thing that you're afraid of. And what you'll realize is over time, as you do this, the anxiety will go away. And you'll realize the thing that you were afraid of really doesn't bring that much fear. Now, you're going to feel the fear more than you've ever felt it because you're going to be experiencing the thing you're afraid of firsthand for a long period of time. But it will go away. So that's kind of generally how you treat it. But going back to kind of the overall topic of people not understanding the obsessive compulsive part of it. They think, oh, well, I have OCD because I obsess over something. I can't get a thought out of my head. A lot of people lack the compulsive part. They might have an obsessive thought where they think about something a lot, but it's generally not based on a fear. It's just a thought that they can't they can't stop thinking about, but it's not a fear, and there's no compulsion. They're not doing something over and over and over again to alleviate some type of fear. Okay? And it's not a disorder. That's like kind of the other thing is like we have now, okay, so science, there's a lot of conflicting information out there on what technically causes OCD. But we know when it comes to medication, a lot of the time what treats OCD is basically SSRIs or SNRIs. Sometimes we use antipsychotics to augment the SSRIs. Basically though, what it is in the brain is a lack of serotonin. And so what this tells us is that we have low serotonin in the brain. So it is a biological, like a neurobiological issue that we have going on in the brain, which means it's not your fault. It's not something that's just like made up in your head, which should make you feel really good. It's not something that's just like, oh, well, like, you hear a lot of people like these days are just like, suck it up and like, and I'm one of those people where it's just like, my whole life I was like, well, just suck it up, pull your bootstraps up and get moving, And I'm that way with, I would say, like 98% of life. But this stuck me into the ground and flattened me like a pancake. Like, this was the one area that I could not do that because it was not a matter of a mental thing, really. Like, partly, because the therapy is mental. And I would say therapy kind of helps. Like, you can treat OCD, I would say, a little bit more with therapy than you can meds. But, like, we'll get into that in another video. But I would say with the medication, we have a lack of serotonin in the brain. So just know that it's not your fault. We have issues. But it's okay because we can treat it. And we can get our lives back. So people that say, like, it's just, I have OCD, it's just, everyone's got it. It's not the fact. It's not the case at all. So, it bugs me. It really does. It bugs me to no end. But hey, we as people who have OCD, it's our job to educate people. One, to show them that there's various types of OCD. And two, to show them the actual, the actual idea of what OCD is: obsessive, the obsession, the fear of something; compulsion, the thing to make sure that that fear does not come to pass; disorder, that it actually is a chemical disorder within the brain. Okay? I'm excited for you guys to be on this journey of recovery with me. It's a lifelong journey. It doesn't end today, tomorrow. We constantly have to practice, okay? Practice our ERP, our exposures, and let's just practice them. We'll keep practicing, and I'll be practicing. Basically, we'll be practicing till the day that we're not no longer here on Earth, right? And I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.